All right. What's going on, everybody? This is Brendan Vermeyer here. I'm super excited to have you guys here. I get super jazzed up every time I do these types of webinars and presentations. So certainly thank you guys so much for joining us. We still have a few people kind of hopping on. Always, a few tech issues at times when getting on GoToWebinar. But again, super glad to have you guys here. So we have a pretty fun presentation, something that I think is one of the most fundamental kind of educational topics that somebody really needs to know in order to really grasp the deeper concepts of metabolic physiology and health and being able to help clients improve their metabolic health and physiology or yourselves, right? And so that is what functional diagnostic nutrition really is all about. It's getting to the root cause. It's identifying those hidden stressors that are essentially throwing your key metabolic systems out of whack and causing these metabolic imbalances and dysfunctions that will cascade into all sorts of potentially chronic conditions. So we're going to be doing a pretty deep dive into that topic today. So certainly buckle up and we'll have some fun here. I think I see some names I actually recognize. Super cool. I was trying to get some of my fellow fitness peers and friends and professionals that I know to tune in. So this will be a good time. So let's go and dive in. So first off, Brendan Vermeyer, I'm the director of this over here, the AFDNP. That is our professional association of functional ninjas that are out saving the world every day and healing metabolisms left and right. I also am a course mentor and clinical advisor. So if you guys were actually to do the functional diagnostic nutrition certification course, you could hang out with me. I could be your mentor. I could teach you things and we can hang out one-on-one through technology, through Skype and all of that. Very cool. And then if and or when you graduate through some awesome mentoring, then you could also have me as your clinical advisor and I give you professional advice on what to do with your client cases. So yeah, let's get started here. Who's that guy? Well, I just talked about that guy. So that guy's me. So far, I mean, I'm a relatively young dude. Maybe that's why I'm so enthusiastic and talk the way I do. But I actually already have 6.5 years of experience within the industry. I started my career when I was 19 as a personal trainer and nutrition coach. I have a lot of credentials, too many to list here, honestly, but personal trainer, multiple nutrition related certifications. I'm a USA weightlifting coach, CrossFit level 1 trainer, obviously all of my FDN stuff. And then, I also too, just so you guys kind of know that I do know my stuff. There's a reason why they're having me put on this webinar, but I have done a lot of advanced clinical courses, everything from like thyroid disorders, oxalate issues, nutrigenomics, SIBO, gosh, I don't know, you name it. I've probably taken a course in it. I've taken over 10 advanced clinical courses so far. Basically, once I have the money for it, I spend it on education because I'm a professional nerd like that. So, all right, so we're just gonna dive right in here. I actually added this slide. I probably could have made it prettier, but I really just wanted to start off with being very to the point on what is the problem that our society is really facing here. And quite frankly, it literally took me 5 seconds to Google, what are society's top killers with medical conditions at the moment for this. So this was what popped up. You guys can literally check out that link if you want, but it listed out as of 2018 the top killers. And so I just wrote down some of the main ones here, but heart disease, cancer, diabetes, neurodegenerative disease, stroke, suicide, kidney disease. Now, with these conditions, this is something I say all the time, but essentially the problem really becomes we, as of right now, our healthcare system is trying to treat what is largely a lifestyle epidemic with drugs and surgery alone. Now, I'm not at all saying anything bad about conventional medicine. I personally am very grateful that we have the technology that we do with drugs and surgery. I think that's great. We need that, obviously. If I was diagnosed with something terrifying like cancer tomorrow, yeah, I'm gonna go get medical treatment. I'm gonna do whatever it takes, right? However, when we look at that list, I just kind of backed out of it. Maybe I can, oh, look at that, I can go back. So when we look at this list though, I think we can all recognize, or certainly could recognize that there's going to be a lot of lifestyle influence going on here. So my point with this list was to point out that the things that are really killing our society and lowering the quality of life and, racking up the healthcare bills, so on and so forth. And certainly there's kind of the economy side of things. I'm not really a economy dude. I'm a science dude. But nonetheless, these are all very much lifestyle induced conditions. Now, yes, can we make the argument about genetic predisposition? Absolutely. I've studied nutrigenomics and epigenetics pretty extensively, but that's kind of the whole thing is even if there is the genetic predisposition, functional health, functional nutrition, functional medicine practitioners, we understand that it's going to be the lifestyle and the environment that really controls the expression of your genes. Therefore, you really can't be blaming genetics on the lifestyle epidemic that we're facing. So another thing too, though, to drive that point home a little bit more, if you look at the fact that like the pharmaceutical industry has never been doing better, like who do you know that is not on some type of medication or on several? We hand out medications like Halloween candy, even at times when we don't have objective data to show that that medication is necessary. I can attest to that personally. I've been on multiple, like ADD, psychiatric related drugs throughout my life. And was there ever any testing done to identify what the cause of those symptoms or health complaints were? No, it was just, oh, like you feel sad or you can't focus or whatever, just here, take this drug. So, I mean, I've been there, I've done that. And hey, again, there's a time and a place. I'm not saying otherwise, but again, the whole point is it doesn't make sense to try to treat what is a lifestyle epidemic with drugs and surgery alone. I look at drugs and surgery as a safety net. It's kind of that last resort. It's a safety net for when things are really, really bad. So I actually created this. It's not the prettiest thing. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm a functional health practitioner, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, even better. So I did create this diagram, though, of what I like to call the healthcare spectrum, right? So essentially, I hope that you guys can't see that. So essentially, we have, more what I call like the health and fitness industry, on the left side, and then we have obviously conventional medicine on the right side, right? So again, kind of drugs and surgery, that safety net versus the industry that I started my career in as a personal trainer and nutrition coach. Now, we need both. I'm not saying we don't need both. We absolutely do. We need those frontline personal trainers, the tip of the spear health coaches, nutrition coaches to teach people the basics of a healthy lifestyle, to teach them how to exercise properly, to teach them how to eat properly, the basics, the fundamentals. Just because it's basic doesn't mean it's not important. In fact, it's the other way around. The basics are the most important. That lays the foundation for your health, with developing a good relationship with food, developing a good exercise habit, so on and so forth. However, there's a really big gap between these things of basically, okay, well, here's what I recommend you do for exercise. Here's what I recommend you eat. And it's very generic. It's very surface level. It's not based on their unique metabolic individuality, right? It's not based on their physiology. It's generic recommendations. Anybody can tell anybody, I think you need to eat a little bit more protein. You need to eat more veggies. You need to get more sleep. You need to drink more water. You need to get more steps in per day. Those are all great recommendations. Everybody needs to be doing those things, but it's pretty basic. And then on the other side of the spectrum, obviously we have that safety net. So this is where functional diagnostic nutrition professionals are really coming into play. We bridge that gap. We own that bridge. We dominate that bridge. So essentially, we are the super functional ninjas that are able to dig deeper. What happens when a generic exercise, nutrition, blah, blah, blah program isn't getting the desired results? What happens when your client hits a weight loss plateau? What happens when your client is expressing a lot of symptoms and health complaints and you have no idea what to do about it because you don't have that knowledge, you don't have that training, you don't have the resources to dig deeper with lab testing and acquire that objective data that gives you a roadmap on what to do. So we are the proactive root cause seeking professionals trying to get to that root cause, identify those underlying contributing factors that are causing the symptoms, causing the progression of the disease state, so on and so forth. So I think you guys get the point. We'll move on. So part of it too, let's say you go to your doctor, right? And, they do some basic blood work. And even if things on the lab report say out of range, and then of course we have to kind of recognize the fact that medical reference ranges are very, very broad. I always like to use like glucose or maybe testosterone as an example. Testosterone might be an easier one, less detailed. But, if you look at like the reference range for like free or total testosterone, if you go to your doctor and test for those things, it's going to be super broad of anywhere from like 200 nanograms per deciliter all the way up to like 800, 900 nanograms per deciliter. And it doesn't matter if you're 20 years old or 50 years old, you're based on the same range. And it's like, well, wait a second. If I'm a 20, how old am I? Almost 26-year-old dude, and I go in and I have the testosterone levels that are equivalent of like a 60-year-old man, that is utterly unacceptable. But you know what the doctor's going to say? Everything looks fine. Everything looks normal, which is a little bit mind-blowing, but nonetheless. Or, if you do have somebody, let's say they're overweight, they're expressing whatever health complaints and symptoms, aside from maybe some medication recommendations that are probably not based on any objective data, unless it's something like, oh, your cholesterol's high, let's give you a statin, or, your blood sugar's high, blood pressure's high, the list goes on and on, all those typical things. But nonetheless, they might give you the recommendation of, hey, well, I'm a medical doctor. I think you need to diet and exercise. But do they teach you what that means? Do they teach you how to do it? No, that's not their job. That's not what they were trained to do. So it's nothing against them. But then it becomes the patient's, the client's responsibility to figure that out. And then where does that lead them? Dr. Google, right? And they're trying to figure stuff out. And then they run into the whole information overload paralysis by analysis. So then it's like, gosh, the ever vague diet and exercise. And then of course, a lot of people too think that losing weight and getting healthier are the same thing. Now, can they go hand in hand? Absolutely. Should they go hand in hand? Definitely. But do they go hand in hand more often than not with the hundreds of clients that I've seen and worked with in, clinical cases I've advised on? No, most of the time they don't. Most of the time people lose metabolic health when they're trying to lose weight, if they actually do lose any weight. So it just becomes kind of a cluster. And, that's what our community is here to do, is save the world. And that's what I'm here to present on, is a better way, a much better way that actually works short-term and long-term and improves your health and makes all of your physique dreams come true at the same time. So that leads us to the topic of metabolic dysfunction. I mentioned it before, but basically if your, generic health coaching program, and I don't say generic in a derogatory way, I just, it's basic recommendations that are not customized to the client's unique physiology is really all I mean by that. So if that's the case, there is probably some underlying metabolic dysfunction, whether they have high blood pressure, whether they have PCOS, whether they have autoimmune Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or metabolic syndrome, or they're just overweight and tired, or whatever it is, anything in between. There is a high likelihood that there is some metabolic dysfunction, or what our community has the trademark term to denote, we call it metabolic chaos. Now, unless you are a certified FDN practitioner, you cannot legally use the term metabolic chaos. That's our term. But if you become one of us, you can use that term. So I used metabolic dysfunction, which is nonetheless kind of the same umbrella term that we use to denote any time there's dysfunction or imbalance within the body's metabolic systems. So that could be something super micro, like at the chemical level. For example, if a client had elevated homocysteine, versus something more macro like AFib, right, which is more of kind of macro organ level dysfunction, but nonetheless, anything in between. Now, when I talk about your body's major metabolic systems, what do I even mean by that? So some of the major metabolic systems that we really focus on the most would be things like the endocrine system, right, your hormones, but also your thyroid, which technically falls within that endocrine category, neurotransmitters, right, still kind of within that endocrine category. Gastrointestinal, huge. The gut is the foundation of your health. Anybody that argues otherwise hasn't studied physiology enough. Detoxification, digestive capacity, energy production, nutrient metabolism. The list goes on and on and on. The human metabolism has limitless pathways and processes, and we're trying to look at the big players and resynchronize those systems so everything is working in harmony and optimally, right? We optimize metabolic function. Okay, gosh, let me check how we're doing on time. How am I pacing here, guys? Whew, I don't know. I better fly. I try not to be too wordy. So this is a good diagram, though, to kind of illustrate that paradigm shift, right? Of this is where medical doctors work, right? They reactively respond to disease states with drugs and surgery. And that's about it. And again, that's not a bad thing. We need that safety net, but we certainly need a lot more. I always use diabetes as a good example. So once upon a time, you might have had healthy blood sugar regulation. So when I'm talking about that, being able to properly balance and regulate blood sugar. So a healthy fasting blood glucose would be like 75 to 85 approximately. Now, that would be like an optimal range, right? But then, okay, you go to your doctor every year, you do that physical, you do the basic blood work with the CMP, CBC, lipid panel, whatever. And let's say, your blood sugar is 90. Okay, well, everything looks fine. Everything looks normal. Keep up the great work. And then 2 years later, you go back to the doctor. It's 105. Well, it's still within a normal range. So everything's fine. Everything looks normal. Keep up the good work. Well, actually, doctor, I'm kind of starting to gain weight. I'm starting to get tired. Basically, the client, patient, person is starting to develop symptoms because that system has already gone haywire. There's no reason somebody should have a fasted blood sugar of 105 if they have healthy homeostatic mechanisms. There's no reason for that. There's going to be an underlying cause for that. But that's, medical doctors aren't responding yet. So then you go back 2 years later and it's 115. Okay, maybe they say it's high. Maybe they say we need to keep an eye on it. It depends on the doctor. Some are more proactive, some not as much. I don't know. It's up to them. But nonetheless, again, maybe you need diet and exercise, maybe you need to improve your nutrition, whatever, but generic, and they're not helping you do it. So then, okay, before you know it, you have fasting blood sugar levels of like 126, and boom, you're getting slapped on the wrist with the diagnosis of you now have type 2 diabetes. So here's your prescription for metformin because now your body has failed to do something that it is naturally designed to be very, very good at doing. I slowed down, I really emphasize that, so I hope you guys get that point. Your body has now failed to do something that is naturally designed to do very, very well. And that's the problem. So what if we had been a little bit more proactive? What if we had used some functional lab testing to look into the underlying causes of what was causing the blood sugar dysregulation and use a holistic lifestyle approach to intervene ahead of time? Now, medical disclaimer, our services aren't for the treatment, management, or prevention of any medical condition. We're not treating specific medical conditions. We're not trying to, quote unquote, play doctor. That's not the point. If functional nutrition, functional medicine, functional health, if the whole functional underlying root cause concept is new to you, you have to understand that paradigm shift. But if it's not new to you, then you get what I mean, and we can just go and move on. So, but nonetheless, this is where we're working. We're looking for the healing opportunities, and that's the perfect way to describe it. I'm not looking, do I have clients with type 2 diabetes? Yeah, I have multiple right now. Do I have clients with autoimmune conditions? Yeah, I have a lot of them right now, and we're making great progress. But am I telling them, hey, I'm going to treat that condition? No, I tell them I'm going to optimize your metabolic function by identifying root causes and identifying healing opportunities and giving you a customized protocol to do that. And then when we do that, do a lot of these conditions improve, if not go away entirely? Yeah, but that, sorry, I guess your, thing went away. So nonetheless, we're working on the fundamental underlying cause level. We're not playing doctors. So anyways, another thing that pretty much illustrates that same point, but important concepts. Symptoms are a manifestation of underlying dysfunction. Symptoms are your body's way of trying to tell you, hey, there's something wrong within your metabolism, and the symptom is the result of that. It's like your body trying to tell you something's wrong, but a lot of people don't really pay attention to it, or they've gotten so used to feeling that way, and society tells them that that's normal, that's to be expected. Or you go to your trusted physician and they say, oh, everything looks fine, everything looks normal. But it's like, to me, if you don't feel normal, why would you accept that answer? Wouldn't you want to maybe seek out a second opinion or some extra help to figure out, well, I feel like crap. Why do I feel like crap? Certainly that's not normal. So nonetheless, I'll briefly touch on this because we need to get through some more juicy, detailed information. But I look at health as a yin yang. So what I mean by this is I look at it as a combo of your physiology, aka the way that your body is functioning, the organ level, cellular level, chemical level, so on and so forth, and psychology. Psychology, physiology, they go hand in hand. They form a yin yang. What do I mean by this? So that's the beautiful thing about science these days, is it really validates and objectively proves what we kind of already have suspected for a long time. But your psychology influences your physiology, and your physiology influences your psychology. I could talk a long time about that. It's something very near and dear to my heart with some of the health issues that I've struggled with throughout my life, which is how I got into this line of work. But essentially, let's say you have neurotransmitter imbalances, hormone imbalances, gut issues, blah, 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 all this metabolic dysfunction. All of that stuff is going to negatively impact your ability to feel good and experience the world around you, aka it's impacting your psychology. It's impacting your mental outlook. It's impacting the way that you feel about yourself and the world around you, probably in a negative way. So, what? You need to talk to a counselor. You just need to work on positive thinking strategies. Hey, that's all great. And if you need that, that's great. But hey, all the positive thinking strategies in the world are not going to overcome a real, measurable, objective physiological disturbance. Now, on the flip side of that, though, let's say that you have somebody who they have, good metabolic health, but they're just a negative Nancy, right? And they're a stressaholic, workaholic, and they're doing nothing to optimize their outlook on life and relationship with themselves and the world around them. That's going to have a very negative effect on the physiology. And we're going to get into some of those mechanisms. So you don't need to be like, oh, that sounds really woo-woo, so let's get some science to back that up. Well, we're going to do that. So what causes metabolic dysfunction? So, basically our health is essentially dictated by the sum of the following factors. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading the list, but I tried to think of about as many kind of major factors as I really could, but things like environment, toxin exposure, pathogens, and of course your lifestyle. So again, you can kind of read through that list there, but we'll go and move on. These are the things that contribute to metabolic dysfunction. These are the things that interrupt proper metabolic capacity. So the short answer, though, as far as like, well, Brennan, what causes your metabolism to go haywire? The short answer would be stress. However, we really have to back up and define what is stress as perceived by human physiology. I'm not talking about, stress as you perceive it, or stress as, Brennan Vermeyer perceives stress to be, or then again, I'm not a good example because I'm a nerd, but nonetheless, I think you get the point. So we have to be thinking about, how does the body define stress? What is the body's opinion of what counts as stress? So I actually came up with my own nerdy definition of stress about 4 years ago when I was a personal trainer at a health club. I wrote it down, I've saved it, I've used it ever since. Feel free to borrow it, just give me a shout, that BV. But my definition for stress is the body's necessity for mental acuity and physical work capacity, aka anything that requires the body to do metabolic work, use energy, use bodily resources to accomplish a metabolic task, right? So I think the easier analogy would be like driving your car versus letting the car chill in the garage, right? So anytime you're driving the car, you're using gas, you're using oil, you're wearing out the tires, you're wearing out the brakes, you're using the car's resources to accomplish a task, right? Whereas then when you give the car maintenance, you rotate the tires, change the oil, refill the gas tank, you are replenishing, restoring, healing the car, if you will. So we'll get back to that in a second though. So things that, would really kind of count as stress, mental emotional stress, which is the most obvious: nutrient deficiencies, genetic single nucleotide polymorphisms or genetic mutations, toxic overload, pathogens, autoimmune activity and lack of recovery, so on and so forth. We'll get more into this here. So more simply, that's why I kind of rushed through that. But more simply, there's 3 categories of stress that your body experiences and basically understands and recognizes. So these are going to be psychological, emotional, like I said, the most obvious. Everybody is cognizant of psychological, emotional stress, and yet I don't know too many people that actually have a grip on their mental, emotional stress. So it's a little ironic, but nonetheless, we understand it's there. Then there's going to be the biomechanical structural category. So these are things like, oh, I've herniated disc in my low back, or I just sprained my ankle, now it's swollen, or something more mild like, oh, I'm really sore because I just did a really hard workout. That workout caused microscopic damage to your tissues, which then is going to have to be healed. So that is going to be a stressor on the body. And then the biochemical, physiological, or what we in FDN land like to call hidden stressors. So these are the things that you would never know are there unless you went looking for them with functional lab testing. I think the best example I could think of would be like GI pathogens, GI parasites, bugs, worms, bacteria that are lurking in your gut and ruining your health from the inside out. That's probably one of the best and top examples, but it could be a lot of other things: heavy metals, Lyme disease, mold toxicity, nutrient deficiencies. I don't know that I would say hormone imbalances really count as a hidden stressor. That's more the result of a hidden stressor, and we're going to talk about that more today, which I didn't even mention it. I probably should have. But today is really going to be more focusing on the hormonal physiological adaptation to stress, whereas part 2 of this webinar that we're doing next month is going to dive a little bit more into the actual hidden stressors. So today is more focusing on the hormone response to hidden stressors. All right. So that brings us to a very, very important topic. Hopefully you guys aren't sleeping yet, because this is awesome information that when you understand it and you utilize it, could change a lot of lives. I've seen it, I've done it, and I do it daily. So autonomic nervous system balance. So autonomic, or what I like to just say, automatic nervous system, right? Like I don't have to think about pumping my heart. I don't have to think about producing white blood cells. I don't have to think about, synthesizing hormones. My body just does these things automatically, right? And that's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So there's the two branches, and I think most of this is probably a little bit of a refresher, but I'm going to put a new spin on it because I think it's oversimplified most of the time. So everybody knows there's sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, rest and digest or feed and breed. Now, I think the taglines are really catchy, that's cute and everything, but I think it's a little bit overly simplistic. So the way I like to think about it is more like sympathetic is using bodily resources to, do work, right? And it's catabolic, right? If you're using bodily resources, it's catabolic. If you're driving your car, it's catabolic to the gas tank. You're burning up the gas, right? Whereas parasympathetic, feed and breed, is going to be more largely anabolic. It's all about recovering. It's all about healing. So when you are in a state of sympathetic activity, that's going to be upregulating a lot of things that are priming the body to do work. It's going to be, increasing vasodilation for blood flow to the muscles, breaking down stored nutrient, whether that's glycogen or fat, or even gluconeogenicizing some skeletal muscle to produce glucose. That's one of my favorite words, gluconeogenesis. But, the whole point is preparing the body to do work, right? Whereas parasympathetic is the other way. We're going to upregulate digestion. We're going to upregulate nutrient absorption. We're going to upregulate the immune system. We're going to focus on healing the body. So I think homeostasis, which equals balance, right? Balance within the metabolism. When you have balance within your autonomic nervous system, that's when you're going to experience vibrant health. So the analogy I like to use, there's actually a book out there that you guys could read. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, which is kind of a funny title, but very appropriate. So if you look at zebras in the wild, the plains of Africa or something, how do they spend their life? Are they running from, work to the gym, to kids' soccer practice, to the grocery store, and cook dinner, tuck kids? Are they living that lifestyle that's high speed, overwhelming, stressful? No, they're chilling, they're sleeping, they're playing, they're grazing on some grass. Once in a while, they might have to fight or flight, maybe they actually get kind of a eustress, a little bit of beneficial sympathetic stimulation by playing, they're playing and kicking each other. I don't know what zebras do for fun, but nonetheless, versus they spend the majority of their life more in a state of parasympathetic, right? So, a lot of times I think animals are living the right way, whereas humans have somehow kind of botched the process. I don't know, pretty crazy. All right, so this all leads us to, there's a reason why I'm going into so much backstory, and that's because that brings us to the topic of the almighty HPA axis, which stands for hypothalamus, the region of the brain up here, pituitary, the pituitary endocrine gland that kind of sits underneath the brain a little bit, little kind of P-shaped gland, and then the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys that everybody loves talking about adrenal fatigue and everything. So here's the important thing to understand is it does not matter which category of stress the stress is coming from, it's going to stimulate the sympathetic nervous system and evoke a biochemical stress response through the HPA axis. So what I'm getting at is it doesn't matter if you sprained your ankle, if you have a tapeworm in your stomach, if you get in a fight with your spouse, either way, it doesn't matter which category, those things are still going to stimulate the same biochemical stress response through the HPA axis. So you got that region of the brain, the hypothalamus, it's always paying attention to what's going on in the internal and external environment. And it's just trying to self-regulate. It's just trying to maintain homeostasis, maintain balance, maintain metabolic efficiency, right? Accomplish as much work with as little energy expenditure as possible. That's a survival thing. That's the way evolution kind of programmed us, is to be very efficient metabolically. So when we're talking about that stress response, obviously, then we're not going to talk about CRH, AC, we don't need to talk about all the little players. We need to focus on the big players for today's presentation. So the major player is, of course, cortisol. I don't think anybody has not heard of cortisol these days. And everybody says, oh, cortisol, that's your stress hormone, and it makes you retain water, and it burns up your muscle. And it's like, gosh, that is way too simplistic. And I wouldn't say inaccurate, but way too simplistic. So I think we really need to be referring to cortisol as a stress response hormone. That's what it does. It responds to stress. Now, that could be something major, like, hey, I just, got in a car wreck, or a longer term stress, maybe like I just lost my job. But it could also be something a little bit more subtle, such as I woke up, I got out of bed. That is technically physiologically stressful. That's why cortisol is highest in the morning and lowest in the evening. Cortisol is literally the hormone that wakes you up in anticipation of sunlight. It's a circadian rhythm hormone on top of a stress response hormone. But nonetheless, what are some of its major functions? Raising blood sugar, anti-inflammatory, enhances adrenaline and noradrenaline, aids in nutrient metabolism. It's very stimulating. It's a get up and go hormone, but since it is a sympathetic activity driving hormone, that also means it downregulates parasympathetic activity. So it's going to suppress immune activity. It slows digestion. It's antagonistic to insulin and melatonin, right? I already said some of that. Decreased bone formation. So it's a catabolic hormone. Now, just because it's catabolic doesn't mean it's a bad thing. People have this negative connotation with catabolism. It's like, hey, guess what? If you were never catabolic, you would never lose an ounce of body fat. So, maybe I just made people raving fans of catabolism for all I know. All right, let's see, double check. How am I pacing? All right, we can do this. We can do it. We might go over, we'll see. So the HPA stress cascade, what happens when that stress response is initiated? So I always like to use one example from each category. So let's go ahead and say you sprained your ankle, you lost your job, and you picked up a tapeworm eating raw sushi. That sucks. So nonetheless, though, you just got 3 major sources of stress, which will then be detected by your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus will then tell your pituitary, yo, adrenal glands, we need to crank out some cortisol because stuff is hitting the fan and we got some work to do. We have some stress to overcome. We need more sympathetic activity to deal with all this stress. So you were previously in a happy, healthy homeostatic state. You're chilling, you're loving life, you're not symptomatic, you're feeling good, you're looking good, and you're dominating life. And then all of a sudden you encounter those 3 stressors. So the body will start upregulating cortisol production, right? So then we have heightened levels of cortisol. So I didn't point out, but the x-axis is progression over time. The y-axis is the cortisol sum, or the amount of cortisol your body is producing in a 24-hour period. So During that acute phase, what we call the acute stress response, yeah, cortisol levels go up to give us that burst of quote unquote fight or flight activity to overcome the challenges. Let's go get a new job. Let's decrease the inflammation from the sprained ankle and the tapeworm, right? So essentially, what the idea is once we overcome the stress, once we overcome the challenge, okay, we remove that stimuli off the hypothalamus, and then we can go back down to homeostasis. We go back to normal. That is a normal, healthy stress response. We go up when we need to go up, and then we go back down to being healthy and happy. However, as you guys can probably imagine in 21st century societal living, think about it. The typical person is malnourished and yet overfed and malnourished at the same time. Makes sense if you don't think about it. Overly medicated, overly sedentary, doesn't get enough sleep, has way too much, financial, emotional, whatever stress going on. But then, you stack a couple extra hidden stressors like, yeah, tapeworm, heavy metal toxicity, blah, 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 some of those hidden stressors. All of a sudden, this person is a train wreck. And even if they resolve some of their stress, which, gosh, I can't say that I've seen too many people that really did a good job overcoming a trying, stressful time of their life. It usually wrecks them. And honestly, I think the cause for that is most people are living such a generally toxic, like literally and metaphorically, lifestyle that all it takes is that, traumatic event or a very trying time or some hidden stressors, and it just sends their body into a tailspin. I think, those trying times or those hidden stressors that they pick up here and there, I think that's really just the straw that broke the camel's back. And then what happens, they're pushing pedal to the metal for too long. It's just like your car, guys. If you drive your car perpetually and you're not giving it enough gas, you're not changing the oil, you're not rotating the tires, aka you're not giving the car the maintenance it needs to keep up, you're going to shorten the life of that car. It's not going to last as long. The engine's going to give out, the radiator. I'm not an auto mechanic. What am I talking about? But you guys get the point. So that system is going to start collapsing. And so that's where we get into kind of the compensatory phase, as we call it, or the exhaustive phase, as we call it, where, yeah, cortisol levels are dropping. But keep in mind, anytime you're out of homeostasis, there's other systems that are going to be negatively impacted. Keep in mind, everything in the body is connected, and we probably will get into that a little bit. But nonetheless, when we have elevated cortisol, it's going to have a major suppressive effect on immune function, which makes you more susceptible to infections. It's going to suppress digestion and therefore, negatively impact your gut physiology. It's going to suppress thyroid stimulating hormone and suppress the conversion of T4 to T3. And then when the thyroid goes off, basically everything goes haywire because the thyroid controls basically every cell in the body. There's receptors for thyroid hormone on every single cell in the body. So, those were just a few basic mechanical examples. But so my point being, it's not just cortisol that's going off. It's not just the adrenals. It's when the adrenals go haywire, it's going to have this domino effect, this snowball effect, and it creates this domino cascade of other metabolic dysfunction. Get out of here, emails. Okay. Oh gosh, how much do I need to get into this? I'll touch on this. I don't think we need to go deep into like steroid hormone metabolic pathway, biochemistry, but I do want to point out some really key points. Okay, so this might blow your mind, or it might be like, dude, I already knew that. I don't know. We'll see. So in the upper right here, we see that we have things like dietary fats and different nutrients like vitamin B5. These things come together, form acetyl coenzyme A. We then take that to form cholesterol in the liver. Of course, your doctor, if your cholesterol is too high, will put you on a statin, which inhibits your liver's ability to synthesize cholesterol. Now, what do we need cholesterol for? Well, guess what? We need it to actually produce your steroid hormones. That's why it's called a steroid hormone. It's coming from these lipids here, these steroid lipids. So nonetheless, though, cholesterol, steroid, there's a connection there. We use cholesterol to make our hormones. We also use it to produce bile for digestive function and detox capacity. But also you can kind of think about cholesterol as like I like to think of it as like the mortar between the bricks of your cell membrane. So, right, you're building a brick wall, you have the bricks, and then you have the mortar that holds it together. That's kind of how it works with the phospholipids and your phospholipid bilayer of your cellular membranes. Gosh, need to articulate really well. There's some sciencey terms being thrown around, but so we use cholesterol to produce the mother steroid hormone that we call pregnenolone. And then we convert that pregnenolone into any of our other steroid hormones. So there's a few really important concepts. I'm not just trying to beat you guys over the head with science. There's very important stuff going on here. So first off, just like everything in your body, your hormones are ultimately derived from the nutrients that you ingest. Therefore, yes, nutrition is essential for proper hormonal health and hormonal signaling. However, we can't just say, oh, well, you just have to eat right and then you have good hormones. No, that also means we have to consider your gut health, your digestive health, your absorption. If you're not properly digesting and absorbing those nutrients, or you have compromised gut health, which I have yet to have a client that didn't have compromised gut health, guess what? Even if you're eating all the best foods in the world, you're still going to be messed up. You're kind of still screwed. So then once we manufacture pregnenolone, though, we produce all these other hormones. So the thing to keep in mind, whether you're trying to produce like testosterone, which we all love, or estradiol, progesterone, cortisol, aldosterone, etc., the thing to understand is that the body is very good at knowing what do we need more of at any given point in time. So these are finite resources. We don't have infinite amounts of cholesterol or pregnenolone to produce all of these other hormones. So we have to understand that the body is going to produce what it feels it needs at that point in time. So what I'm getting at is when the body is under copious amounts of stress, what hormone do you think it's going to prioritize producing? I'm circling around it. It's cortisol, the stress response hormone, because that's going to be that hormone that gives you that fight or flight stimulation to overcome the stress. But keep in mind, that's going to come at the expense of your other hormones because these are finite resources. So essentially that means that some of your other hormones, like your fertility hormones, your sex hormones, testosterone, etc., they might go in the tank for the sake of producing cortisol. And that does happen. I see it all the time on lab testing. So to use a good example, though, this is a survival mechanism. Survival comes before fertility. And if you think about like evolution, that makes sense, right? If a species can't survive, if survival is in question, why would we need to be fertile? There's no point in carrying on the bloodline or having the capacity to reproduce if we can't survive ourselves. It doesn't make sense. So that's why the body does that. It's kind of an evolutionary hardwired thing. Now, I like to use a 21st century example of this phenomenon action. So being a personal trainer, historically, I don't do any training anymore. But obviously I've worked with a lot of people trying to lose weight. So for example, let's kind of use the Biggest Loser approach, right? The TV show. I'm not calling anybody that. But obviously, this kind of crash diet approach, right? I want to lose, 50 to 100 pounds. So what am I going to do? I'm going to diet and exercise. What does that look like? Well, maybe I'm eating a little bit better qualitatively. However, mostly I'm focused on lowering calories. I'm focused on, lowering energy intake and increasing energy expenditure, right? Because that's how you create a caloric deficit. That's how you quote unquote lose weight. Hopefully, as you guys know, there's so much more to it than that. Are we trying to lose fat, or are we trying to lose, muscle? Or are we trying to burn up our organs? What are we trying to do here? Are we trying to get healthier? Or are we trying to? So anyways, you get the typical woman that wants to lose fit, or a guy. It doesn't. Well, let's use a woman. That's the whole point. So 50 to 100 pounds, and she starts eating less. She starts moving more. She probably doesn't like herself that much, unfortunately, and that motivation is really being fueled by sort of a self-loathing of being uncomfortable in her skin and not being happy with her life. Otherwise, why would she put herself through all that? That's kind of the point. And I'm not being mean. Like, I've been there. That's the thing. I've put myself through a lot of, like induced suffering in the name of, quote unquote fitness and physique and all that. So I get it. But what happens, assuming that lady's metabolism is kind of working, yeah, she might start dropping some pounds, right? She might start dropping a lot of pounds. But I think we can all maybe have experienced or seen one of those people who they do that and they lose a lot of weight and wow, you really leaned out. You really lost a lot of weight. That's so cool. But then what are they not telling you? Oh, they lost their cycle. They lost their cycle. They lost their menstrual cycle. Why? This is what's going on. Their body is so stressed out that their body is really trying to prioritize the production of cortisol to keep up with energy demands, to keep up with stress demands. And that comes at the expense of all these fertility hormones. And so that's kind of what's going on is, yeah, their cycle goes out the window because there you go. So that's a really good example of that phenomena in action. So if you're a trainer and you have clients that experience that, or somebody, educate them, or maybe take our course and then educate them. Either way, we're not going to touch on this. This is just a more complicated version of what I just showed you, and I don't think we need to go into all that, so we'll move on. We'll briefly touch on this. I want to make sure we get to the case studies and stuff. So I will briefly touch on, so then we have the HPT axis, or hypothalamus pituitary thyroid. Now, I mean, you have the HPT axis, you have the HPA axis, you have the HPO axis, you have the HP, well, the other T for testy, AKA your entire endocrine system is communicating with one another. It's kind of one big axis, because then there's the OAT axis, the ovarian adrenal thyroid axis. But the more simple thing that you guys need to understand is the entire endocrine system is intertwined. It's communicating with one another. So, the adrenal axis will impact the thyroid axis and vice versa. These axes will influence the gonads. The entire endocrine system influences one another. Thyroid hormone, we don't need to go too deep into thyroid physiology for today's purposes, but nonetheless, you can think about thyroid hormone, specifically free T3. That's the guy that runs the show. It's like the gas pedal of the metabolism. So like I said before, every single cell in the body has receptors for thyroid hormone, and it's really T3 that runs the show. T4 is kind of more of a precursor hormone. It does have some very important functions, but T3 is really kind of the main thing we're talking about. But what is it accelerating? Everything from brain development, fat burning, which is, I highlighted that just because a lot of people care about that, but there's certainly a lot more going on. Body temperature, nutrient metabolism, pregnancy and fertility. The thyroid controls metabolic rates, and it's not just calories in, calories out. It's metabolic function. Basically everything your body does metabolically, the thyroid either speeds that up or slows it down. So then here we just see a diagram, probably a messy one. I think I have another one. Yeah, here's a more simplistic one. So stress, we have the HPA axis, HPT axis. So I actually said this already, but when you have elevated levels of cortisol, it actually inhibits thyroid stimulating hormone and also blocks or inhibits or slows down the conversion of T4 to T3. And gosh, I love this because I run a lot of lab testing, and I run multiple panels on every client. So that way I can see this phenomena in action. I can literally see the correlation of one test to another. So for example, if I run an adrenal stress profile, I'm looking at their cortisol levels, but I also ran, a thyroid test, and then I can see how the adrenals and thyroid are, influencing one another in a good way or not, or gut stuff and some of those other tests that I run, but just an easy example there. So causes of HPA axis, or causes of axis, endocrine axis dysfunction, HPA axis, HPT axis. So I'm not going to even begin to read through all these, but perceived stress, circadian rhythm, gut dysfunction. You'll see a lot of crossover because the reality is, yeah, a lot of the same things that throw off one axis negatively impact another axis. And there's a lot of different mechanisms behind this. And that's what's really cool about it. You can dig into those mechanisms, have deeper understanding. But things like gluten sensitivity or bacterial infections or heavy metals, even things like Wi-Fi, which we are all like bathed in 24/7. You can actually put Kevlar on your walls if you want to block Wi-Fi. Of course, then you won't be connected to Instagram, so that might ruin your day a little bit. Got to get those Snapchats out, right? Anyways, what am I talking about? So then we have reverse T3, just briefly touch on that because it is a major player, but it's the brakes of the metabolism. It's not a bad thing. The metabolism's just smart. Like, do we need to speed up or slow down the metabolism? So certainly there's a lot to be said for, hey, it's just like driving your car. There's times you need to speed up, right? And then there's times you need to hit the brakes so you don't slam into the car in front of you. So just because reverse T3 is the brakes, that's not a bad thing. Don't think, oh no, it's slowing down my metabolism. I don't like reverse T3. No, it's there for a reason, guys. You got to hit the brakes so you don't get in a wreck. So there's a reason for it. However, yes, reverse T3 does compete for receptor bonding with T3. So literally, reverse T3 can block T3 from doing its job. That's an important concept to understand. It's kind of that balance of stepping on the gas pedal versus the brakes, but I don't think we need to nerd out too much on all that for today. What raises reverse T3 though? So the reason I included reverse T3 into this presentation on quote unquote stress is because I think reverse T3 is one of the best like biomarkers that I measure with lab testing that really tells me a lot about basically how stressed out is this person's metabolism. I think cortisol levels and reverse T3 are probably my two favorite ways of just kind of getting a feel for like, yeah, how jacked up is your metabolism? How stressed out is your physiology? So I really like measuring reverse T3. I can see it go down, go up, and it very much corresponds with the amount of burden and the amount of stress that their body is experiencing. So, what are some contributing factors that will raise reverse T3? HPA axis dysfunction, heavy metal toxicity, inflammation, chronic infections, low calorie or very low carb diet, over exercising. Why am I highlighting that? Well, again, being a personal trainer, nutrition coach background, how many trainers out there, like when their clients aren't losing weight or getting the results that they want, oh, well, let's cut down your carbs and let's have you do fasted cardio 3 times per week. Yeah, great recommendation there. And I make fun because I have the right to make fun of that because I've been there, and I don't think I ever recommended that. I was a little bit ahead of my time, but I lived in that world, so I'm allowed to make fun of it a little bit. Come at me, bro. Symptoms of HPA adrenal dysfunction. Again, how are we doing on time? Yeah, we're good. I can run over, by the way. I've got nothing else to do than educate the masses. So if we go over, that's cool. But symptoms of high cortisol, low cortisol, again, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading you the list, but, I think at a quick glance, you can be like, holy guacamole, that, sounds like me, that sounds like my clients, that sound, there's a lot going on there. And obviously you can experience symptoms of high cortisol and low cortisol in the same day. Depends on, if your levels are high or low at that point in the day. It is a circadian rhythm hormone. Symptoms of HPT axis dysfunction, right? Of thyroid issues, hypo. Gosh, those are big lists. But again, I guarantee you that all of your clients are experiencing at least one, if not 20 of these, and this is stuff that we can measure. This is stuff that we can fix, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into this, but we could spend hours on it. And I want to get to these. All right, time for some case studies. Here we go. We're getting there. Not doing too bad on this pacing after all. Good. So now that you guys have kind of a deeper understanding and appreciation of what is stress as perceived by the body, what is the physiological biochemical response to stress, that we, went into some of those mechanisms. I would have liked to go a little bit deeper into those mechanisms, but you guys get the gist of it. And then, like I said, part 1, we're very focused on the hormonal response to stress. And then part 2, next month, when we come back, we're going to talk more about those hidden stressors that provoke the biochemical stress response. But let's look at a few case studies. So I'll tell you right now, these are real case studies. These are my clients, obviously anonymous, but these are my clients that I work with, and some of the stuff that I see. So case study number 1, let's dive in. So this individual, I'm trying to remember who this is, doesn't matter, but nonetheless. So this client, polycystic ovarian syndrome, subclinical hypothyroid, and insulin resistance are kind of the main dysfunctions that we're working with. And I'll tell you right now, I only am picturing the hormone test results on this presentation. Like I said, I'm saving the underlying stressors for part 2. So when I say that, like the gut testing, the GI pathogens, the food sensitivities, heavy metals, that kind of junk, or stuff, I should say, that's part 2. Right now, we're more focused on the hormonal response to that stuff. So we can see with her hormone test that she did with me, through me, we have kind of lower estrogen levels, very low progesterone, which is pretty typical, and then high androgens, very typical of polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then she had some really low free cortisol levels and then high metabolized. We don't need to go into the nitty gritty mechanisms of what's going on there, but obviously a total crap show, just really jacked up hormones and experiencing tons of symptoms and health complaints that would correspond with all this. And then, her thyroid was actually pretty interesting because like her T4 really wasn't too bad. Her T3 was actually like, I mean, kind of where it should be within an optimal range. I'd like to see it more like 4, 4.2, but that it really is a pretty good T3 or free T3. But her reverse T3 was really high because of all the stress on the system. So reverse T3, like I said, that's why I included it and taught you guys about it. Reverse T3 blocks T3 from doing its job, literally. It's like if you have two people trying to get into the same doorway, like if somebody tries to get in through the same door as me, I'm a relatively large human, they're probably not getting through. It's going to be me. I'm going to block that doorway. So I guess I'm like reverse T3. And then also, maybe some autoimmune activity based on that's barely elevated though. Anyways, but vitamin D low, insulin. Look at that insulin. To put that in perspective, somebody with like great blood sugar regulation and great insulin sensitivity, that should be like 3 to 5, single digits, low single digits, somewhere between like 3 and 5 for fasting insulin. She was at 20. I don't know what the type 2 diabetic diagnostic criteria is based on insulin. I think fasted glucose is 126. Insulin, I'm not sure, but to me, it doesn't matter. If it's too high, it's too high, and we need to fix that through a holistic protocol. And then hemoglobin A1C. Okay, case study number 2, estrogen, and I am going to show some before and afters too. I just want to map out some examples of what this looks like when your clients are messed up. And that's the thing, guys, like, it's crazy to me. Yeah, I love before and after pictures. That's great. If I can help a client lose body fat, that's great. Or, the scale goes down, whatever, I get it. But there's so much more going on under the surface that we can measure and we can see if we're moving in the right direction. Change happens internally before externally. And I always have to explain that to my clients. And I'll show you guys an example here in a second. Case study number 2, estrogen dominant subclinical hypothyroid with possible autoimmunity, insulin resistance. So pretty similar, but estrogen dominant instead of PCOS. But look at that estrogen. It's through the roof. It's stupid high. Progesterone pretty high as well. Testosterone on the low side. So, a lot of excess body fat and, mood issues and, all sorts of different symptoms and disturbances, low libido, lack of motivation, fatigue. The list goes on and on and on. But her thyroid, actually kind of similar in a way, a little bit low on the T3, a little bit high in the reverse T3. And that ratio really matters, right? It's that ratio of gas pedal stomping versus brake stomping. So it's not about one, it's about the relationship of the gas pedal to the brakes. And then once again, possible autoimmune activity going on, slightly elevated insulin at 8. Again, I'd like to see that 5 or less. Vitamin D low. So pretty similar. And I see the same stuff over and over because here's again, I tried to include 3 relatively similar case studies. But again, estrogen dominance, look at that one, 111, that's crazy. And look at that testosterone, it's like non-existent. Look at this, oh yeah, this was a fun one. Look at this person's cortisol. This was really interesting. She had actually, well, other than the elevated cortisol while she's sleeping, AKA not getting very restful sleep. But other than this outlier, she had a relatively normal looking cortisol pattern. It just was like delayed. Her cortisol awakening response was delayed. Now get this though, this was kind of funny. I was trying to make sense of that. I was clinically correlating. I'm trying to understand why is your cortisol pattern looking the way it is. So I talked to her and actually made a lot of sense because she's a attorney and most of her clients that she works with are out on the West Coast, which is 2 hours behind us here in good old Kansas City. So the thing is, she has a delayed cortisol awakening response, basically because she's not starting her day. It's like her schedule is on West Coast time, but her physiology is kind of on, Central Standard Time. And so essentially her cortisol is adapting to her work schedule because that's the time of day when her clients are available, you know. So it was interesting, a good example of how adaptive your cortisol levels are to your routine and your circadian rhythm. But once again, you know, very low hormone output. Now, I didn't run this panel, otherwise we wouldn't be missing some of these key players. She got that data through her doctor, and then I crunched it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be missing all this. But still, nonetheless, some subclinical hypothyroid stuff going on. Do we even need to go into this one? Just an example of perimenopause, but this was kind of a uglier thyroid situation because we did have some autoimmunity going on. So, you know, some potential Hashimoto's, and whether you want to call it Hashimoto's or not, it is autoimmune activity. So that's never a good thing. But vitamin D low, insulin really, really high, homocysteine. So nonetheless, kind of another good example of very typical hormonal metabolic chaos, metabolic dysfunction due to stress physiology. Okay, so now, how are we doing on time? Kind of right at the top of the hour. I'm going to run over. If you guys can stay, do it. Why not? It's a lot of fun. I'm having fun. Yeah. So before and after labs here, we'll try to wrap this up within the next like 15-ish minutes. Before and after labs, though. So I want to show you guys some examples of, you know, some magic that we can work. So this first one here, this was a 8-week difference. So, you know, we got her started, we did all the preliminary testing, you know, the progesterone really low, testosterone way too low, cortisol really, really low. So kind of that exhaustive phase that we talked about earlier. So I put her on a customized protocol that you can learn, you know, how to do in the FDN course. And then 8 weeks later, we did a retest. 8 weeks. That's it. 8 weeks. That's really not that long. 2 months. Estrogen stabilized, progesterone started to come up. It went from postmenopausal ranges to within range. That's, you know, is it where we want it to be? No, but that's a huge improvement for 8 weeks. Look at the testosterone, though. This was huge, huge, almost below the range to on the high side of the range. And I can tell you, she reported a lot of good symptom improvements, you know, like increased, you know, fat burning, increased energy, increased motivation, increased libido, a lot of great things. Joints weren't hurting as much, bloating went down, water retention, all that. A lot of good things. And then look at the cortisol. She basically went from exhaustive to like getting close to homeostasis in 8 weeks. So I'm pretty proud of that. For 8 weeks, that's not too shabby. Okay, so some thyroid before and after. I've got to give this girl props. She's one of my just absolute best clients as far as, you know, compliance and just being so proactive and seeking out education outside of our time together. She's also become, you know, just awesome friend, good person. She made me custom shirts with my business logo on it. Just total rock star. So, you know, if you're tuning in, definitely shout out, you know who you are. She'll probably watch the recording and share it because she's a raving fan, because we've gotten some great results. So she had been diagnosed hypothyroid for 11 years before she started working with me. So when I got around to running a thyroid panel, I was not surprised, although disturbed, to find, yeah, her TSH over 200. To put that in perspective, TSH really shouldn't ever go over 3. Now, medical doctors really won't pay attention to TSH until it goes over 10. Again, difference of being reactive to diseases versus proactive in the name of optimal health. That's what it's all about. But either way, 200 is insane. And her thyroid hormones were just in the tank. But look at her thyroid antibodies. Now, this might not mean anything to you, but the thyroid antibodies are indicators of autoimmune activity. And her TPO antibody was over 1,000. The lab doesn't go over 1,000. So the cutoff was 1,000. It could have been more. It could have been 1,200 for all I know. Anyways, so we got her started on a protocol. 8 weeks later, we retested. Now, her thyroid hormones didn't move, but that's to be expected with that developed of Hashimoto's. We don't have time to go into details on Hashimoto's, but with Hashimoto's that is that progressed, I don't expect her thyroid hormones to improve until we really heal the thyroid quite a bit. So first you got to put out the forest fire before the trees can regrow. That's my analogy. You know, the forest is not going to regrow while there's a raging forest fire. So anyways, we put out the fire though, or we're working on it. So look at her antibodies though. over 1,000 down to 319 in 8 weeks. And this is through a natural, holistic, functional lifestyle protocol. So really amazing. And then 8 weeks after that, we did a retest. We're actually due for another retest right now. It's been a little bit too long, but when we did another retest, I did pull out some secret weapons to use to get things moving a little bit. But then we actually did make some great progress with her thyroid hormone. We tripled her free T4 in another 8 weeks. So literally within 16 weeks, she went from this to antibodies down and thyroid hormones. We tripled her T4 and doubled her free T3. Now, it's still not where we want them, but again, for 8 weeks, that's amazing progress. Pretty proud of her. I'm just a nerd that told her what to do. She's the one that did it. So, she needs props. Before and after, what's the significance of this one? Oh, yeah, okay. So the main thing going on here, I mean, yes, we did drastically improve her thyroid function. We can see the T4 went from being very low to stable, improved free T3 as well. Antibodies improved, so putting that autoimmunity away a little bit. But the biggest thing was her insulin resistance. This was a type 2 diabetic client. Again, I don't tell them that I'm treating their diabetes. That's not what I do. I practice functional diagnostic nutrition. And when we do that, magical things happen. So her insulin levels went from 20 down to 11. Now, again, 11 is still like double where I want them to be, but for a 12-week protocol, that's amazing. And we did that through diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. That's our hallmark program. I think we can probably skip this one. You guys can just see the improvements, though. This was an acute phase stress response. We see these crazy high levels of cortisol, suppressed levels of testosterone, estrogen. Oh, this is a guy. I included him because a lot of my clients are women, and I wanted to make sure I included a guy in this presentation. So an estrogen dominant acute phase stress response dude. And then it was either 8 or 12 weeks, I don't recall, but we did the retest. Estrogen went down a little bit, but more importantly, the testosterone went up a lot, 48.776. And then the cortisol dropped a lot, 445 to 202. So acute down to a good range there. So again, very good progress there. Okay, so like I have said like 3 times now, this presentation is focused on the hormonal adaptation to stress on the body. However, like I said, part 2, we're going to dive into the underlying causes. So, Brennan, do we just fix hormones? No. Think about your hormones like the check engine light on your car. When the check engine light comes on, the problem is not that the light is on. The problem is what that light represents, which is there is underlying dysfunction that is messing up the hormones. So the big thing, we always have to be asking why. Why are the hormones doing this? We have to dig deeper. We have to understand the underlying factors that are causing the endocrine system to go haywire. So that's why, like, people these days, it's because our society is addicted to instant gratification. We all know it's true. None of us are, completely immune to that. Even the best of us, that's just how it is. We all want instant gratification. So a lot of people, when they start experiencing symptoms, whether it's medication to suppress the symptoms, or if they do, they think, oh, good for me. I'm going to talk to a hormone practitioner, and the practitioner is going to run a hormone test and tell me my hormones are messed up. And then they're going to give me hormones to fix my hormones. Okay. I mean, don't get me wrong, HRT can be helpful at times, but that's not fixing the underlying problem. And it really bothers me how many practitioners and clinicians are just super eager. How many HRT clinics are there? They pop up everywhere because hormone health is very trendy right now. There's a lot more info out there on hormone health, and there's a lot of people that will make a lot of money off, hey, your health problems are due to hormone imbalances. Let me run a hormone test and let me give you hormones and I'll fix your hormones. That's not fixing the problem. It's a Band-Aid. I could talk about that a lot, but it drives me crazy. So HRT gone wrong, and then we'll wrap up. So these are some HRT gone wrong with clients I have worked with. I was not the HRT provider. I was the one that identified the messed up HRT administration. So this first one really kind of ticked me off a little bit because I knew that she had hormone issues, and when I ran the test, I was pretty scared. So this is a postmenopausal woman that was being pumped full of estradiol every 2 weeks, and I think testosterone, and they were never doing any testing to monitor her hormone administration. And when I talked to her about it, and I talked about the test results to her, I asked her about it. It's like, you've got to tell me, what's this HRT like? She's like, well, actually, it is kind of like a cattle line. Basically, I walk in, I wait in line, I get my shot every 2 weeks, and I'm sent on my way. Oh my God, that is malpractice to me, in my opinion. Maybe I'm not qualified to say, I don't know, but to me that's messed up. Because seriously, that's a big deal. Like having raging levels of estrogen, that does make you more susceptible to hormone sensitive cancer on top of, tons of other conditions. That's irresponsible. Or like this guy over here, this was a younger guy, like upper 20s, lower 30s. And he was, oh, well, your testosterone's low. Yeah, because of a stress response. That's why they're low. But that's not the way that the HRT providers see it. They're just like, oh, testosterone's low. I can make you feel better. So then they were giving him testosterone. But look at that. Like, it's too much. It's too much. You can't just give hormone like that. Got to think about how that hormone's being utilized, metabolized, and, what are the underlying factors. So, and then finally, kind of a similar example, but raging estrogen, raging testosterone, and exhaustive phase. Why do you think they have messed up hormones? And they're in the exhaustive stage of a chronic stress response. How about we deal with the underlying stressors, and then we don't have to pump them full of hormone. Anyways, okay, guys, you survived. Congratulations. So that is my presentation on hormonal stress physiology, all about how our bodies respond to stress with hormone balancing. So part 2, which we'll be announcing through our emails and stuff. Part 2 is coming out in July. We're going to dive into those hidden stressors. So Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Certification Program. Here's what's up, guys. First off, who is this program for? Now, guys, you could say that I'm biased because I'm the director and I'm heavily, I work for the company full time and this is my jam. So you could call me biased, but let me give you a little insight. I came into this community because it was the perfect fit for what I wanted and what I was looking for. I was a personal trainer, I was a nutrition coach, but I wanted to be the guy that had all the answers. I never ever want to have a client that's not getting results and I don't know what to do to help them. I never want that. So I will study, I will learn, I will do what it takes to have all the answers. Do I have all the answers? No, but I haven't been stumped yet. And FDN was exactly what I was looking for. I was going to school as a trainer, nutrition coach, and going to school thinking like, well, should I go to medical school? Should I, go to this or that? It just didn't make sense for me. FDN was the perfect fit to give me the best functional health education available, the best science, the best resources, the best testing, the best methodology. You could say that I'm biased, but I don't think I am. I willingly came into this program. I pestered the crap out of them to get hired, and then I worked my way up to the position I'm in. I did it pretty quickly, honestly. So I don't think I'm biased. I just really think it is the best thing out there. I don't want to put anybody else down, but I do think the way that we teach this information is in some ways superior to other kind of similar programs and stuff out there, because we take a full lifestyle approach. We really correlate with where the client is at in their health journey. We really consider the person, the whole person, their story, what's going on with them. I think with kind of the industry, I see a little bit of a bad habit. Again, I want to tread lightly here, but I see a bad habit where sometimes practitioners don't really have that like health coaching background perception, and it's more, well, let's run a lot of expensive lab testing and then treat the piece of paper with supplements, aka let me run a ton of testing and then I'm going to give you a ton of supplements to fix the piece of paper. That's not how it works. You use the paper, you use the data to correlate with what's going on with this human sitting across from me, and how can I use a holistic lifestyle approach, which is going to be diet, rest, exercise, stress management and reduction, and supplementation in order to help optimize this person's metabolic function. And it works better. It works the best when you do it that way. That is the functional way. That is the functional diagnostic nutrition way. I could not be more passionate about this. I hope that comes through. I'm like intensely passionate about it. Our world needs so much more of this. You know, this is not at all like a sales pitch. This is me saying, if you want to help people to the best of your abilities, this is the type of stuff you need. You know, the functional medicine, nutrition, functional health, integrative, that this whole world is exploding right now. Get on Instagram and you're going to see it everywhere. Like this is the future, and we're already doing it, and we've been doing it for years already successfully with thousands of clients. You know, I wish I'd gotten into this sooner than I did. I'm young, you know, so I'm glad I got into it when I did. But this is where it's at. This is the future. And if you want to be a functional ninja, this is how to do it. So the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Certification course, it's a serious undertaking. It's not for the light of heart or the whimsical. Now, if you guys listen to me blabber for the past hour, yeah, I think you're probably a good candidate. If you have a background working with humans and helping them improve their lives and their quality of life, and you want a deeper understanding and you want to be able to help them on a deeper level, and you want to be the person people come to when basic stuff isn't working. So, you know, again, since I'm a personal trainer, I kind of resort to that as a good example, but it could be a massage therapist, physiotherapist, whatever, psychologist too. But when your clients or other people's clients are not getting the results that they want, you're going to be the people they come to and they seek out when things aren't working, because you have the know-how and skills. That's what we teach you how to do in our certification course. So today we are offering a special promo for attending this amazing webinar. I like to think it's amazing. We are offering a promo that is good through Sunday, which I believe is July 1st, but through Sunday, if you sign up for the FDN certification course, we are going to give you our advanced course on urinary hormones and HPA axis dysfunction. I don't want to say for free, but it's included in the normal cost of the FDN course. So let me tell you about that real quick though. So first off, some of the testing that I showed you guys in my presentation is not the immediate testing that we teach in the level 1 course. It's actually advanced. It's advanced material. I just showed you guys some advanced lab testing. Now, technically all lab testing is advanced. I mean, if you're smart enough to interpret lab testing, you're already advanced. But nonetheless, I was using a more comprehensive, a more in-depth hormone panel, and we teach all about that test, the ins and outs, in this advanced course. So that advanced course will come with your registration for our standard FDN certification course if you guys sign up for that before Sunday ends. So that's the promo, and I'll tell you right now, that's an amazing value. I just found out that's the promo like an hour ago or 2 hours ago, and I was like, dang, really? Like, because I paid my way, you know, I paid in full, and I was happy to do so. It was well worth it over and over again. Best investment I've ever made. It's changed my life, changed my career, and launched me into the stratosphere. And now I get to teach this stuff. You know, it's the best. So, you know, it's very realistic to do, but yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of learning. So if you're up for it, join our ranks of functional ninjas and help us save the world, because as chronic disease statistics show, we need it. Our society needs it. So that's all I got. That's what's up. Part 1 done. Part 2 will be next month. We'll announce the dates. But that promo for the advanced course on stress physiology is yours if you sign up before Sunday. But catch me on our Facebook page. I'm a pretty visible dude. I do the Facebook Lives. I'll do a Facebook Live tomorrow night, so you guys can tune into that. But come hang out with us. Contact us with questions. We're happy to answer questions. But become part of the best community ever. I really believe that. I couldn't be more passionate. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Again, Brendan Vermeyer, director of the AFDNP, mentor, clinical advisor, blah, 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 all of my other stuff that I do. Very happy to have you guys here. Much love, Star Children. Namaste, and we will talk soon, hopefully. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great one.